And hello, Hearts of Oak. Welcome to another interview coming up in a moment with Seth Gruber. Seth Gruber is the CEO and founder of the White Rose Resistance, host of Unaborted, and a Turning Point USA ambassador. And I've watched many of his debates, many of his podcasts. I bumped into him at CNP conference in Miami in February. And he has such a winsome position on this. We've had other speakers, and Seth brings something different. So we start with him presenting what the pro-life position is, why we need to remind ourselves the importance of standing up for those with no voice, those with few rights in society. And then we look at why the left are so passionate about abortion, why they're desperate to fund as many abortions as they can. Where does that come from? So we talk about that craziness, I guess, in the left, a passion for death more than we have a passion for life. And then we go into the institutions. He's just been on a tour, numerous tours, all sold out. He based in California, but moving all across the country. Got another set of dates coming up in autumn, in the fall. You can check out that on his website, sethgruber.com, and be a part of that if you are in the area. And he talks about engaging with the political sphere, engaging with local activism, engaging with the church, and why the church is so sound on this issue. Never they should be the most vocal about standing up for the rights of those who have no voice. You love listening to Seth presenting this in such a winsome way. And hello, Hearts of Oak. Today it is an honor to talk to the CEO and founder of the White Rose Resistance, host of Unaborted, a Turning Point USA ambassador, and that is Seth Gruber. Seth, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, Peter, good to be on with you, man. Thanks for your program and being willing to talk about the issues that so many won't.
Always, as I said to you before we went on air, it's my red line as a Christian. How can you talk about life and not actually defend life? But we'll get into all that. All the links are sethgruber.com, thewhiterose.life is there, and all the other links are in the description at sgruber91 on Twitter. Everything else is there. But just the White Rose, that seeks to educate the public about the humanity of the unborn baby, to expose a grotesque immorality of the pro-choice position and inspire the church to accomplish her spiritual duty of ending the greatest injustice of our time. But if I could just, for the viewers and listeners, we have had pro-life speakers on before, including my good friend Scott Klusendorf, and we've had Janique Stewart on a number of times. While being pro-life is not one of our key aims as an organization, I think it's essential that our audience regularly hears a reasoned defense of the importance of life. And for those watching who are Christians, they command all Christians, Proverbs 31:8 and many other places, but says, speak out on behalf of the voiceless and for the rights of all who are vulnerable, and who is more voiceless than the unborn. But that's my prelude. Seth, before we move into the issue, and for our UK audience, probably 65% UK, 30% US, but who maybe do not know you, could I ask you to introduce yourself before we move on to the sanctity of life?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I've been a pro-life activist since I was a fetus. So I've been in these waters, I guess, quite literally for a long time. My mother was the executive director of a pregnancy resource center while pregnant with me in Los Angeles County. So she took over a center in her late 20s in Azusa, California, which is right where APU is, Azusa Pacific University. And then she married my father and continued directing that center until she gave birth to me. So she was waddling around the center as the executive director, and only stepped down once I was born. And so we have the pamphlet announcing my mother stepping down from directing the pro-life pregnancy center to welcome me and to be a stay-at-home mom. So then I did the Walk for Life every year and supported our local pregnancy center. I was one of the top childhood fundraisers, although I was more incentivized by the free bicycles and Disneyland tickets. But at 7, 8, 9 years old, obviously I was swimming in those waters already, and I had an understanding of something's wrong here, something's evil here. It wasn't until my senior year of high school. Now I was homeschooled through 8th grade, and then I went to public high school. And this is Whittier High School in Los Angeles County. It's actually Richard Nixon's alma mater. And they told me I couldn't pick the topic of abortion for my senior project. And so it's sort of, I'm only embellishing a little bit here, Peter. Okay. I basically said, here's a copy of the Constitution you're making me read in government class. I recommend you read it, or you're going to have a lawsuit on your hands. And so I did threaten a lawsuit to Whittier High School at 18 years old, public high school. And, they weren't ready for a classically educated homeschooler. And so they backed off real quick. I did my senior project on the issue of abortion, and I did my volunteer hours that everyone had to do to graduate. I don't know if they do this anymore, by the way. It used to be a little more difficult to graduate. You actually had to work hard, but you had to do a 10-page research paper. You had to give a speech at the end of the year, and you had to do field work hours that aligned with your topic selection. And so I did those at the Center for Bioethical Reform, CBR, led by Greg and Lois Cunningham, my godparents, because my mother was on the board of directors for CBR when it was founded in 1991. So the first thing they had me do as a senior in high school was to scan 300 images of first trimester mutilated aborted babies on their high-end scanner and categorize the photos in their database for their educational projects. So for 2 days straight, about 2 6-hour shifts, I'm scanning and looking at choice. I'm scanning and looking at reproductive health care and women's rights, allegedly. And that was probably one of the biggest turning points in my life, was actually being forced to look at the eyeballs, noses, faces, ears, fingers, hands, arms of slaughtered little children, all at the 7, 8, 9, and 10-week stage. I mean, Peter, this is what I was told was pregnancy tissue by the culture. And I had never seen those photos before. Even as a pro-life student with a mother who had been the director of a pregnancy center, I had never seen those photos before. And so that we're talking about, of course, when 90% of abortions are performed the first trimester, and when there's the greatest public support for abortion the first trimester. And so then I went off to a Christian college in Santa Barbara, started a pro-life club there, learned that I was not so much amongst friends as I thought. I thought Christian college, right, Peter? Everyone's pro-life, right? I was homeschooled, right? I mean, come on, every Christian's pro-life. And how naive I was. I did not realize that when I enrolled there as a freshman. I learned that there are pro-abortion professors on the payroll, actually, at Westmont College in Santa Barbara, California. And some people, they really don't like when I go after my alma mater, and I'm not very popular there. I don't really care. Here are their names. Omidi Ocheng, he no longer teaches there, though I took public speaking from him. He's pro-abortion. He once said in an email, he said that the students at Westmont College were best served when our chapel speakers invited us to tarry in the liminal spaces of complexity on the abortion issue. And then there's Deborah Dunn in the Communication Studies Department, who I had an email debate with, who had advertised a internship with the local Planned Parenthood funded and sponsored representative named Lois Capps. She's only pro-abortion through point of birth, Peter, in Santa Barbara, local politician, right? And Planned Parenthood lackey. And my Christian college is advertising internship opportunities with the pro-homosexuality, pro-LGBTQ ally, pro-abortion through point of birth Democrat politician in Santa Barbara. And the Christian college in that city, whose motto is Christ preeminent in all things, is telling their students, hey, check out this cool internship. With who? The spirit of the age? It reminds me of something Fulton Sheen once said, Peter. If you wed yourself to the spirit of the age, you'll find yourself a widow in the next. But you're not allowed to talk about those kind of things at Westmont College. And so let's see who else was there. There was Mary Doctor, a Spanish professor who's pro-abortion as well. And then a married couple, Chris and Sherry Heckley, who teach in different departments, and they're both pro-abortion. So that's 5 or 6 professors on the payroll of a Christian college whose motto is Christ preeminent in all things, who defend abortion through point of birth. And so I started finding the the steel in my spine, actually, Peter, at a Christian college, not at a at a state college, which might surprise some people. It shouldn't today, by the way. It should not surprise you. Most Christian colleges are just kind of what Bonhoeffer meant when he said cheap grace. And so I did my summer job with the CBR. So that was my summer job. When I would come home from college, I was a paid intern for them, and I helped organize and run probably over 10 or 11 genocide awareness projects on university campuses in Southern California, with the big aborted baby photos that compare abortion to historically recognized forms of genocide. So that's my background, Peter. And then when I graduated at Westmont, I joined Life Training Institute under the tutelage of Scott Klusendorf, and began speaking in youth groups and Protestant and Catholic high schools, and the occasional church that had the balls to actually speak out on life and let me have the pulpit. And then at the end of 2020, everything changed. I had all my speaking canceled for several months, obviously. And then I met Jack Hibbs and Rob McCoy. Rob McCoy became my pastor. We moved our family from South Orange County to Godspeed Calvary Chapel. I started the pro-life ministry there. We built that ministry there. It's now saving babies on a monthly basis. It's got sidewalk counselors, mentor families for those who choose life, celebrating them, throwing them baby showers, post-abortion healing, and orphan foster care. I ran my show out of Rob's studio. Rob, of course, was the mayor of Thousand Oaks, the city just north of LA County, while the senior pastor of Godspeed Calvary Chapel. And when he told Governor Gavin Newsom-Leaney in California that he wouldn't be shutting his church and he opened it, he had lawsuits, and they actually came to possibly arrest him and the elders. And then 1,000 Christians from around California showed up in the parking lot of Godspeed Calvary Chapel that Sunday and said, "Start with us." So those are my people. That's my church. And that's how God started kind of moving through my ministry to mobilize and awaken pastors and the church to get engaged. And so we launched the White Rose Resistance right after the overturning of Roe versus Wade, to rebuild Christian resistance before it's too late, to get the church engaged and stop waiting for pro-life ministries and pregnancy centers to do the job that God's called the church to do, actually, which is to be the hands and feet of Jesus, to hold back those staggering toward the slaughter, to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, pure and undefiled religion, love the orphan and the widow. The unborn child is definitely an orphan in God's view because his parents want him dead. And so that's what we're building, kind of the Turning Point USA of the pro-life movement is the goal, Peter, and to actually get the church mobilized at the local level to end abortion. And so we go into college campuses, we go into churches. We've had 2 of those tours this season. We're doing another one in the fall, and we're hiring and we're growing. So if any people in the U.S. are interested, head over to thewhiterose.life, head on over to Red Balloon, and apply if you think that God's called you to end abortion.
Well, let's go on the issue. I mean, I've heard Greg Cunningham thing twice in the UK. Fascinating, an absolute hero. And I've loved watching Jack Hibbs during the lockdown as someone who's fearless and will stand up.
Yeah.
To everyone. Love it. But on the issue, I mean, at hand, I mean, why should we care what people want to do with their own private lives? I mean, surely it's up to women, or now that men can have babies, it's up to men as well, to do what they want to do with their own body.
Yeah. I mean, the culture of death has crept in to the church a lot, Peter, and so we say silly things like that, and I hear Christians say things like that, who sometimes even say that they're pro-life, right? The typical line, like, I wouldn't get an abortion. But I mean, I'm personally pro-life. It's like saying I'm personally against slavery, but if my neighbor Bob wants to purchase black men, I mean, who am I to, it's like, what?
Yeah.
So I mean, the culture of death, it creeps in, and we begin to parrot the culture. We begin to sound more like the culture of death than we sound like the blood-bought Christ, the blood-bought bride of Christ. And that's a problem. It's a real critique, I think, on the church that we don't actually take the liturgy of our own faith seriously, that we don't actually catechize our children. And so they do get catechized, but they get catechized by the culture, which has its own kooky religious premises as well, doesn't it? And so, I mean, that's kind of how I always start, because it's like the fact that that's even an acceptable statement for some Christians to say is, I think, a real judgment on the church. Why should we care what they do with their body? I mean, it's like, Okay, do we have to do this? Okay, all right. I was a preborn male. I was a male in the womb. God was knitting me together in the womb. And if you just want to go this purely scientific route, right? If you're talking to an atheist, I was developing myself from within. We know from the science of embryology that the preborn child develops themselves. Right, the mother's not like asking baby to grow. It's like the child's directing their own internal growth from within. That's what it means to be a preborn human being. And so my male genitalia was developing itself in the womb, Peter, which means that I was not my mother's body. I know that's super sciencey for pro-choicers. I know that's super hard to follow, but pregnant women actually don't have male genitalia. And so if a preborn male, unborn child can be a male and have their male genitalia being developed, then they are not their mother's body. There's lots of ways to kind of poke fun at this, obviously. Here's another one. Let's say a pregnant woman had intractable nausea, Peter, and could not stop throwing up due to her pregnancy. She's tried diclegis, she's tried other forms. Nothing stopped the nausea. She's almost on bed rest now. She can't keep any food down. So she goes to her OB, Peter, and she says, I really need some of that thalidomide. Nothing is stopping this nausea. And he goes, well, I'm not going to give you thalidomide, ma'am. It's illegal. Plus, don't you know your baby is likely to be born without any arms? And she ignores him. She finds some illegally anyways and takes it. 4 months later, her baby's born without any arms. Did she do anything wrong? Every time I've asked that to a pro-choicer on a college campus, their eyes glaze over, Peter. And most of them say, hell yeah, because I trick them, I get them, because, reality always reasserts itself in the end, doesn't it? And when it does, it'll slap you in the face hard. And so I always trick them because they're acknowledging a portion of reality. But they're trying to suppress the rest of that in order to maintain their pro-choice delusions. And so every college student I've asked that to, Peter, has said, hell yeah, that's effing wrong. That's effed up, dude. What the, they think it's like really effed up and really wrong. And then I say to them, who the hell are you to judge her? It's her body, her choice. Yeah. The fetus has no right to her body anyways. If she can murder the baby, she can certainly intentionally harm the child in a way that doesn't kill the child. Are you telling me, pro-choicer, that it's worse to harm someone than to kill someone? Because that's what they're saying, right? When they say she has a right to abortion, but it's wrong and effed up for her to take thalidomide to get rid of her nausea, and her baby will be alive, likely. Her baby will live. It'll be born without any arms. And they go, that's screwed up, man, because she knew that she was doing something that could harm her child. And I'm like, do you hear yourself right now, right? So there's always lots of ways to kind of poke fun at it. But what does that do? It reveals that deep down, they know that the body in her body is not her body. So why do we care about what other people do with their body, Peter? Because sometimes you can use your body in a way that intentionally harms or kills other human beings. That's why. Wow. And when you do that, that's wrong, and that should be illegal, and we should have laws against that. That's why.
So when I talk to friends on the left, I do have some of them still, and they seem to be passionate about abortion. In fact, I have some friends who I didn't think they had any interest apart from just their social media themselves, what they watch on TV. And you discuss current affairs, no interest. And then you mention the issue of, maybe it's not right to take the life of another human being through abortion. And they literally manifest, and suddenly they become so passionate about killing babies. This seems to be kind of what they're about.
Right.
How have we come to that there is so much passion for death in part of our society?
How have we come to that? I mean, how have we not come to that? I mean, that's the history of humanism. That's the history of most civilizations throughout all of human history. I mean, most civilizations practiced human sacrifice. So most civilizations practiced slavery. In fact, every civilization did. So I think the church has to I think conservatives have grown so comfortable and cushy with our freedoms in the West, and we're watching those freedoms, obviously deteriorate or disappear entirely really quickly. and especially in America, right? Because we tend to linger a little behind the UK and Canada, culturally and politically, Peter. We're so comfortable, and we're like, what is going on? It's like, how did this happen? It's like, what are you talking about? Like, this is the norm, y'all. This is the norm. You've grown so fat on liberty that you've mistaken it for libertinism and licentiousness. This killing human beings, innocent human beings, and sacrificing them to kooky deities with the belief that your life will be improved is actually quite normal. Yeah, it was Christianity, y'all, that kind of brought about this concept of the sanctity of life, the rights of the individual. The human being has dignity because they're created in the image of God, and so this concept of the Imago Dei kind of really, in a very real way, provided the basis for this idea called human equality and human rights that we've taken for granted. So most people who hate Christianity, Peter, wouldn't want to live in an America without it, or in a country without it. It's the same people who say that God doesn't exist, but they also really hate him. It's like, wait a second. I'm not sure. I think so. I think you got the math wrong there. You're right. The American Humanist Association, what existed for the eradication of God, but they were all atheists. It's like, so you want to eradicate someone that doesn't exist? It's like, that's a little weird. But it's like eternity's written on the heart of man, right? Like, we all know there's a God, just like we all know we're killing babies. We all know this. I just talked to a crazy, kooky pro-choicer at San Diego State University. And he was talking about the thing in the womb, the thing in the uterus, and he called it a baby. And then he corrected himself and he said fetus. And I said, shoot. Yeah, you said baby, didn't you? Yeah. Freudian slip, right? And I told him, I was like, it's okay. Pro-choicers do that a lot because reality always reasserts itself. And it's a baby, but you've got to try to use dehumanizing terms to justify child sacrifice so you can have orgasms without responsibility, huh? That's why you actually you slipped up there, huh, brother? And he laughed. He was like, yeah. I've had that interaction more than once, actually, Peter, on college campuses where they accidentally called a baby. That just happened last year at UC Berkeley, too. The dude was talking about the fetus and he called it a baby, and then he changed it. He said fetus. I was like, so we all know actually what we're doing. That's the bottom line. And I think that the church in particular has to start treating this issue and really the broader secular moral revolution as a secular regressive revolution. There's nothing progressive or new or modern or advanced about their ideas, right? The left's ideas on human nature, gender, abortion, marriage, sexuality are not more modern, but far more ancient than those of the revolutionary founding fathers that built America and of the Christians that largely built the West. And so, as C.S. Lewis once said, we all want progress, right? But if you're on the wrong road, progress means doing an about turn and walking back to the right road. In that case, the man who turns back soonest is the most progressive. And when you notice you're on the wrong road, it's only the pessimist who continues to walk off the cliff. The progressive turns around and finds a way to right himself and get onto the wrong road, onto the right road, rather. And so child sacrifice and human sacrifice goes back to the first generations immediately following Adam and Eve. Child sacrifice is what incites some of God's most colorful language in Scripture. Let's put it this way. God gets pissed. He gets real pissed when the Israelites are killing babies to Moloch and Baal and Asherah and all this craziness, right? Well, we have the same gods of our culture today, the god of sex and the god of human sacrifice and child sacrifice, but they're described in such clinical language, right? They're described as sort of anti-religious, like there are no gods, but it's still the same spirit that demands the same things as those ancient deities did. They were really just demons. So we're still sacrificing children to demons. We just call it healthcare, right? We call it women's rights, and we call it feminism. And so this cult of feminism and progressivism is just another iteration in a long humanistic experiment that has sought to place man as God. And the problem, right, with replacing God from the culture, as we're starting to experience, Peter, is that other kooky religions take its place. So there's actually no such thing as moral neutrality. Replace Christianity, and then you get humanism, you get progressivism, you get evolutionism, you get neo-Malthusianism. And they're very religious worldviews too. They're just way more dangerous and way more kooky. And so the church has to start realizing that there will be a standard and there will be a dominant religion. The question is whose morality and whose religion? Well, why not the one that built the West and provided the freedoms that everyone takes for granted today and will no longer get comfortable with being uncomfortable in order to defend on behalf of the next generation? And if we can't get the right to life right, we're not going to get any other rights right. That's why the founders in America said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They put life first because the right to liberty and pursuit of happiness don't mean much. In fact, they mean nothing at all if you can be murdered.
Tell us about you've obviously just finished, 15 or 20 dates, finished last month, and you said you're going another one in the fall. Tell us about that and where your focus has been. Is it church groups? Is it political groups? Is it local activist groups? I mean, where are you spending your time on those dates, on those events?
Yeah, I used to speak everywhere, but now with 3 kids and with my 2023 calendar almost full already, praise God. I mean, I never thought that would happen. We only have 2 or 3 slots maybe left in the entire year. And so we've had to really focus on high impact events and getting other people mobilized and engaged, because I'm not building a Seth Gruber organization. I'm rebuilding Christian resistance, which entails stewardship. It entails personal responsibility, right? It entails sacrifice, actually. And, another time, Peter, I can tell the whole story of the White Rose Resistance. But, these were 20-somethings Christians who were murdered and had their heads chopped off on February 22nd, 1943 in Nazi Germany, because they distributed anti-Nazi leaflets all around the country to try to prick the conscience of the culture and get the church wakened up and engaged. And they were murdered for their efforts. So the reason we think them brave and courageous is because they sacrificed far more with far less freedom to stand against their Holocaust than we have ever done to stand against ours. That's why we think these figures are so heroic, Peter. They had far less freedom than we in the West do right now, and they sacrificed far more than most of us have ever sacrificed. That's a critique against the church in the West. And so we exist to rebuild that Christian resistance and develop the local leadership to get people engaged at the local level. And so that means finding brave men and women. Right? That means finding courageous men and women who actually want to lay down their lives and their sacred honors to tear down the high places once again, and to give God a reason to show America mercy. And so we prioritize churches for that event. And I've been blessed and frankly blown away, Peter. I don't know how this has happened apart from the hand of God, to have been in more pulpits on Sunday mornings on the issue of life since the end of 2020 than any pro-life speaker in the world that I know of. I don't know of anyone who's been in as many pulpits in a 2.5-year period, individual separate churches around the country. And we've started dozens of pro-life ministries at those churches, by the way. I don't just leave and say, hey, thanks for letting me speak. Now, later, like we bring in our leadership and ministries that we partner with to develop and train people to get engaged in sidewalk counseling outside of abortion centers, orphan foster care, mentor families for those who choose life, actually, and post-abortion healing as well. And so as we're growing and mobilizing people at the local level, the goal will be getting the church engaged in some of those lanes, including public events that really mock these ideas in the spirit of the age, and raising up new activists that actually take our content to the streets as well. And so we're building all of that infrastructure now because we're a brand new organization. So we got to hire and find the right talent. And God's been blessing our organization immensely, and we're very excited for how God's going to move this year and in the following year. And so we do the college campuses to provide that last voice of sanity in out of control environments and to capture interaction and dialogues that most people don't ever see. And that's the beauty of social media, even though it's harder to get your content out if you're a conservative than it was 10 years ago. But, my conversations with pro-abortion people are often conversations no one online has ever seen before. Rarely has anyone ever encountered someone, and I'm not trying to sound like an ass here, Peter, or speak pridefully, but this is the hill I will die on. And so very rarely has anyone ever spoken to someone like me, who's ready to jump into into the cage and knows exactly what I believe and how to articulate it. And so pro-choice, we see this happen in conversations, Peter. Pro-choicers literally walk away from me sometime at the end of the conversation saying, "Thank you. I had never thought of that before." Wow. And I'm like, whoa, so there are people who will still be humble enough to admit that they don't know everything. And they did not know what to say to me. And we want to capture those interactions to change minds, change hearts, and save lives and get people engaged in our movement. And then we're working on lots of digital media activism resources this year that, frankly, you've never seen in the pro-life movement before that you'll see coming out this year. And then the church tours where we spend most of our time. So we did 9 churches in the fall, and we're finishing, I think, 16 churches between January and May this month. And so we go to Idaho on Sunday. Today's May 17th. So we go to Idaho on Sunday, and then we go to Vermont the Sunday after. And then I'm done for the spring, and we take all of June off and go on family vacation. But so that'll be 16, 20, 25 or 26 churches between August of 2022 and May of 2023. And it's about time, that the church get woken up and actually adopting personal responsibility. So I'll leave you with this line from Bonhoeffer on this question. Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said, "If I sit next to a madman as he drives a car into a group of innocent bystanders, I can't, as a Christian, simply wait for the catastrophe to happen, then comfort the wounded and bury the dead. I must try to wrestle the steering wheel out of the hands of the driver." Well, the drunk driver in the West is the secular, progressive, regressive moral revolution that's driving that bus or truck over the bodies of innocent families, children, babies, and the social fabric. And the church has been sitting in that passenger seat for so long, especially in America, Peter, where we, the people, are the sovereign. And we've been screaming the gospel out the window at people who are about to be plowed over. But we won't actually try to wrestle the steering wheel away from the driver to actually save innocent human beings who are about to be destroyed by dangerous ideas, ideologies, or in this case, forceps that will tear them limb from limb. We have to start exercising responsibility and stewardship. That's actually the role of the church, Peter. That's not the role of all the 501c3 organizations that we're grateful for that do good work. But we have way too many nonprofits, frankly, in America. But the reason is because most nonprofits are doing the work that the church has abdicated, that the church used to do. We've got to get back to our early roots. So that's what we're trying to build.
One church I remember having many conversations with and had to walk away, and they said, "Peter, you need to understand we're pro-life, but we need to be very careful on this issue." And then I remember it being another church, and they were going to the 10 Commandments, and the person had spoken, "Do not murder," and for 5 minutes in that said, "Abortion is murder." And the church made a public apology the next Sunday to say we need to be very careful. And then another pastor told me, "Peter, you're probably one of those people who will stand outside the abortion clinics and shout at those poor women going in." And I sat back thinking our churches are afraid of public opinion and of offending the congregation rather than they are worried about offending God.
That's right.
I guess it's the same in America, that that confusion of actually fear of your congregation, I guess the tides that come into your congregation, rather than a fear of God and how God looks at their actions.
Yep. So there's a scripture, there's a character in scripture named Phineas, and we don't know much about him except it says that Phineas drove a spear through someone who was committing sexual sin, and it says he was zealous for the honor of God. And then it says, so God stayed his judgment. And that's all we know about Phineas, is that he dealt with the sin in the camp. He took initiative and responsibility. God honored it, and he stayed his judgment because of Phineas's actions. We're not zealous for the honor of God in the West. We're not. We're zealous for the tithes of our congregants whose political sensibilities we won't offend by preaching the full counsel of God from the pulpit. We're zealous for seal claps from our congregants. We're zealous for a little bit more crumbs from the table of the worldly leaders. And if we will not be zealous for the honor of God, I fear what we might hear on Judgment Day, when we were wedding ourselves to the spirit of the age and woke up and found ourselves a widow in the next.
Yeah. Can I ask you about moving on the politics side? Some of our viewers and listeners will be Christians, many will not, and they probably look at a political solution for this. So I'm wondering if maybe just then to finish off on that political side. Where are we with the whole Roe versus Wade issue? It's exciting to see states taking control of that and fighting for that. Let us know what's happening on that.
Well, I mean, gosh, when Roe v. Wade got overturned, Peter, the what we call the liberal establishment in America started collapsing in on itself like a dying star. I mean, like, they lost their freaking minds. They were saying things like, the Republicans are now coming for interracial marriage. It's like, they're like, what? Like Clarence Thomas, our most conservative pro-life Supreme Court justice, who is frankly more conservative than Antonin Scalia, actually. He's married to a white woman. Just like, and he's the main reason why Roe v. Wade got overturned, of course, because he's been the most reliable conservative on the court. It's like, really, do you think he's coming for his own marriage? Like, but you see the kind of things they say when you come for their sacrament of abortion. So yeah, things have been a little out of control here, really since the scamdemic, but certainly since the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And so this is really like it is a new season in the fight for life, and it's a moment for the pro-life movement to begin showing how seriously they take this issue. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of pro-life ministries that will say things like, you know, the woman should have no legal punishment at any time in any state for any reason if she gets an abortion when it's against the law. Now, listen, the pro-life movement chose a strategy a long time ago to go after the abortionists and not the woman. Because if they went after the woman and she was also being convicted of a crime, then she could not testify against the abortionist in court. And so they chose the liberal strategy in the drug wars of going after the provider rather than the user, if you will. That's actually a liberal strategy. And it was the conservatives that wanted to just shut down, you know, the drugs and actually punish drug users. It was liberals who said, no, let's go after the providers, the drug sellers. Well, whether it was right or wrong, the pro-life movement chose the strategy of going after the providers, the abortionists, and not convicting the woman so she could testify against the abortionist in court. But with Roe v. Wade overturned and states being able to ban abortion fully and entirely, if we believe that the preborn child is a person with equal rights and dignity, then we cannot say, oh, the parents who arranged the death of that child and pay for the death of that child, if it's not the abortion pill, right? Because obviously you're doing that yourself. But if you're going to an abortionist, you're paying a hitman to kill your baby. What's wrong with a law that says if you kill innocent human beings, there are legal consequences? I don't see anything wrong with that law. Now, if a mother paid, let's say, a hitman to drown her child in the pond, she might not be charged with first-degree murder, but she would be charged as a conspirator, right? As an accomplice to murder. Why would we not say the same thing with abortion? And so there are a lot of pro-life ministries that are intentionally crafting legislation that put in exceptions for rape, right? And that put in exceptions to make sure that the woman can't be charged in any way, shape, or form. So I am an incrementalist in the sense that I'd rather have a bill that protects most preborn children than have a bill that protects no preborn children. simply because I don't have the votes at the time to get the abortion ban passed. So I'm willing to accept incremental victories because that's how the left has brought us to this moment, incrementally, and they've been very patient. But yes, I think the overturning of Roe versus Wade is kind of showing now in this new season who takes this issue as a true Holocaust, who takes this issue as actually genocide of little babies, and who's willing to live like it, legislate like it, pray like it, and sacrifice like it. And so I guess I'm grateful for that, in the sense that, we're seeing who is willing to toe the line and who's willing to attack at the front lines. And unfortunately, I think a lot of organizations and some right to life groups in different states don't really want a full ban on abortion at the state level. But if we're going to be zealous for the honor of God, that is what we have to pursue. I don't think that an incremental bill is apostasy or means giving your soul over to Satan. I think we take the victories where we can get them, but the goal should be abolishing abortion at the federal level, of course. Now, that's going to take a lot of states to get the kind of coalition you need for a constitutional amendment. But as we work towards that in America, the church needs to be getting engaged politically. They need to be voting with their Bibles open. Pastors need to be preaching the full counsel of God from the pulpit on these issues, so that their people go and vote with their Bibles open at the ballot box to get the kind of governors elected and the kind of state legislatures elected that will ban abortion at the state level. That's going to set a new precedent in America. It's going to send a very strong message to the Moloch serviles in the Democrat Party and the liberal establishment that you have not begun to see me fight yet.
As we finish, there is an absolute wonderful podcast that people can find. Your latest one, I think, You Can't Build a Culture of Life by Funding the Culture of Death. And that's the economic side by Michael Seifert, founder and CEO of Public Square. And I would encourage our viewers and listeners to go delve into that. That's a whole area that we don't have time for today.
Yeah.
But Seth, thank you for coming on. I was so chuffed when I saw your name at CNP conference and I made a beeline for you. So it's an honor having you on. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, good to meet you, Peter. Stay faithful, stand fast, and don't let the commies get you down, okay?